Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room
You live now, Chair.
Thank you. So good morning, members. We have a quorum and I call the meeting to order. I welcome all members to this meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras when using the tablet device. Members, I would just like to remind you again about the sensitivity of the microphones. They are able to pick up a lot more than previous mics, and just be mindful of that. And agenda item 1 then, members, is apologies. So we have an apology this morning from Brian Kingston. Any other apologies, Clerk?
No.
Any members aware of any apologies? No, thank you. Item 2 then is chairperson's business, and we have a briefing today, members, by Raise in closed session at the end of today's meeting. This will be on key priorities of the department. I will adjourn the meeting as normal after the last agenda item, and then we will hear from Raise. I would encourage all members to stay for this session, as it's really critical first step for the committee in the identification of areas of focus for our forward work programme. Members, there's another item that's come in quite late in the day to us, but it's an invite from the Public Records Office for an event that's taking place tomorrow in Belfast. It's on Friday, 1st of March 2024 at 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. in Titanic Boulevard in Belfast. I'm not able to attend that, members. I'll just check.
I have another engagement in Belfast. Sorry.
So, if any of the rest of you members, you can take it away and think about it, but if any of the rest of you are able, would you advise the clerk, and the clerk can advise the relevant body, if any are able to attend that?
What time's that again, sorry?
It's a
12
12
p.m.
to 1:30, yeah.
I may be able to get along to it, but it wouldn't be for 12. But I'll check with yourselves later.
Well, I'd imagine if you're there at any point, it's probably so. If any other members wish to attend that, please do let the clerk know. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to item 3, which is our draft minutes, and I refer you to the draft minutes, members, from the meeting of the 22nd of February, which as drafted there. Are members content? Sorry, it's at page 6 of your meeting pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of 22nd of February as drafted?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Item 4, matters arising. Members, at last week's meeting we asked the departmental officials to confirm what the local housing allowance rents are for 2024, you will recall. The LHA rent level depends on the number of bedrooms in a home and on which of the 8 broad rental market areas a home is located. The details on the areas and the rates are available at the link provided there on page 22 for you. So have members any comments, or are they happy to note?
Happy to note.
Happy to note. Thanks, members. Agenda item 5 then is correspondence, and I refer members to the pack at page 24. You will note, member, the number of items for committee consideration are coming into me directly, and I'm forwarding these on to the committee team for inclusion in our correspondence here for everyone's consideration. Are members content to action all other correspondence as outlined on the correspondence memo today?
Chair, sorry, could I just ask, can we get an update on the strategic investment papers? I'm just trying to find which page it's at here, but there's a number of areas that are in amber. If it's not covered off today, could we just get an update from 95. The department on what's happening with those?
Yep. Members content with that?
Yep.
Clerk, you happy? Yeah. You've got the detail. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to item 6 then, which is a briefing by the Department for Communities Permanent Secretary on departmental priorities. So members, again, you have been provided with a copy of the department's first day brief at page 203. Colm has confirmed that he can be with us for 45 minutes this morning, and encourage you all to be as succinct as possible with your questions to allow as many members as possible to ask questions. And I will ask Colm to be as succinct as he can as well. So I will now invite Colm and colleagues to the table. Good morning, gentlemen, and to Fáilte Roh a Lig. I welcome now Colm Boyle, Permanent Secretary for the Department, along with Paddy Rooney, Deputy Secretary in Work and Health, and Mark O'Donnell, who is Deputy Secretary in Housing and Sustainability. You're all very welcome this morning, gentlemen, and can I go ahead, Colin, and invite you to make a brief opening statement, as succinct as you can possibly make that, given the limitations, and we want to ensure we get as many members from questions and as many questions from members as we can manage. So thank you.
Okay, Colin, thank you very much, and really good to be here. First of all, just want to say on Minister's behalf, he apologises for not being here, but it's an executive meeting which was rearranged in terms of clashing with this. And I know there's been a provisional date set for him to come and see you, which I know he's looking forward to doing in due course. I know members have received first day brief from us, so that should give you a good indication of the breadth and some of the depth of what we're involved in.
Yeah, and sorry, Colin, I should have said, actually, we appreciate that, and it's actually very well laid out, I think, in terms of clarity and who's responsible and where the priorities are. So that is a very useful, and members will have had that for some time. We'll be fairly across that detail of that, so appreciate that.
We're conscious of the scale of the department, both in breadth and depth, and we wanted to make it as accessible for members of your committee as we possibly could.
Appreciate that.
Look, I'm not going to speak for very long here. I just wanted to spend about 5 minutes with you, just saying a couple of things. First of all, I think the big picture of where we are as a department is really important. So what's our starting point, and would we start from here? And our starting point, post we're looking forward at the rest of the mandate over the next 3 years in terms of what Minister's priorities are. But right now, big questions here, I think, are what's our level of capability like? What's our capacity like? Particularly in terms of resources, which has been a very significant piece for us over the last 2 years. And I just want to give you a bit of a flavour for that. I know we've touched on that in the first day brief, but there's a couple of things I just want to flag up. And when you have that level of capacity and capability challenge, I think in terms of us trying to match the ambitions of our Minister, who is very ambitious, he's set out clear priorities for us already. Housing in the round is going to be a very big feature for him in terms of addressing homelessness, looking at new build, looking at maintenance of social housing across the piece, lots of other reforms that he'll want to do, including borrowing powers. I think is something which he's very keen to explore further. He's already made it very clear to us he's very focused on the entire sports brief, very conscious of Casement and sub-regional stadia dominating probably the early days, but interested in sport in the round and active participation and everything that comes with that. So there's lots of sports like rugby and hockey as well and others that need to be taken into account. Disability, another big one that he wants us to focus on, and benefit delivery, and he's also very conscious about our expertise in benefit delivery and the extent to which we're drawing in extra work and extra jobs from the Department for Work and Pensions. So there's a lot in that, and I know he wants to focus as well on fraud and error, some level of concern around that. He wants to make sure we take a specific look at that. So big picture, when you think about the last couple of years in resource terms, we saw my first year I came back, I was in DOF for a year as acting permanent secretary. Came back in 22-23 to here. When I arrived in May of that year, we had a £47 million pressure in the resource budget, and we had to make sure we saved that money by the end of the year. We did achieve that with some pain. That paled into insignificance compared to the following year, this current year, where we had £111 million resource pressure, and that left us with some very difficult decisions that had to be taken. £59 million reduction as well in terms of capital budgets in relation to all of the things that we needed to do and wanted to do. It required me to take a significant number of decisions, backed with my senior team here. And some of those actions include 600 vacancies remaining unfilled. We had to really clip back in overtime, cut back on discretionary expenditure, which only accounts for a very, very small portion of our budget. Most of our budget is inescapable, it's statutory. We had to reset discretionary support spending levels. I'm very conscious of our £13.7 million budget for grants, but we were able to stretch a little bit beyond that, but it was incredibly challenging to do that. We've rationalised our DFC estates. We applied a 5% reduction to arm's length bodies, which was very difficult and very challenging for them. Reduced rate support grants and social housing development programme. We had a curtailed back from our 2,000 unit target to just under 1,500. Now, as against that, we were able to sustain funding at the previous year's levels for supporting people, which is something we held very dearly in terms of the value of that programme and the impact of that programme. We maintained our level of funding for 280 community and voluntary organisations, and we also maintained labour market partnership funding for councils as well. We also were able to apply a bit of a top up to the 13.7 million of the grants, up to around about 20 million at that stage. And all the way through, we were briefing parties in terms of where we were going, what the pressures were, what we were hoping to achieve, and what we were hoping to do. Fortunately, we've had some additional executive allocations in recent weeks, so that's been really welcome and really helpful. But we're facing into a very, very stiff breeze in terms of what's coming next year as well. So we know that our budget is likely to reset to the opening budget for this year. And I know my team's coming next week to brief you guys specifically in the budget, so I'm not going to steal their thunder. But the 111 is on repeat, plus some. So we know we're into a very, very challenging scenario. So everything we've had to look at in terms of people asking us to do more, whether that's be review of discretionary support, or whether that be Cliff Edge Coalition asks, all of that's extra money in terms of the Northern Ireland Block Grant. We are struggling to keep our heads above water here in terms of the statutory services that we deliver. We can get into that a little bit more, particularly on the benefits side. It's very acute, but I've also seen it across the department. And what I'd like to do, Colin, as well, is just acknowledge the senior team who have been absolutely immense through that time. All of our team leaders and managers and senior managers down through the organisation, and our frontline staff, who no pay increases of any significance, quite derisory pay increases in terms of how they felt about it, in terms of the feedback they gave me. But we had our hands very, very, very tied, and I know where the Department of Finance felt very, very badly about how that all played out. And I think when you have a situation where we have a third of the civil service in our department, many of those staff are low paid, many of those staff are serving people who are on benefits, who are getting more money on benefits than some of our staff are getting on pay. It puts into very, very sharp focus the jobs that they do, the pride we have in them, and the DNA of our department is to get things done, is to help people. So when we talk about supporting people, building communities, shaping places, we genuinely get all of that. So it is what we're there to do. So it is a can-do department. So to have that level of concern from your staff about hygiene factors that they really shouldn't have to worry about has been deeply concerning for us and deeply troubling for us. But despite all of that, we will deliver the budget this year. But I would not like to think that us delivering the budget on the money in some way is some miraculous achievement. It's been very difficult pain to do it. And I think we've seen some suffering of services there as well. So we're in danger of tinkering around here with suboptimal services that will come back to bite us. And I think there's a failure sometimes to recognise the combination of what we do with what health is all about, and the combination of what we do with where education is or where justice is, and how all those services link up. And we do have metrics that will show, for example, in terms of number of the benefits where our clearance time targets are not being met. We're considerably off those because we don't have enough people. If we had all of the people that we needed to do the work we need to do, we're about 1,100 shy. So it's 1,100 people shy. So a very significant challenge lying ahead of us. Now that doesn't curb the ambition, doesn't curb what we want to do, doesn't curb how close we are to communities, and doesn't curb the extent to which we're able to achieve right across the piece. And there's lots of things I haven't talked to you about, for example, city deals and how we progress all of those. But we're happy to get into any detail you wish to now. All I wanted to say was we're living in a constrained situation, succeeding very, very well at it, but with deep fault lines in our resourcing.
Listen, thank you very much, Colin, and I do appreciate that. And I suppose we're very conscious here as a committee, that this is a department which has within it some people who have been rendered vulnerable by circumstances, and a department that could achieve a lot because with the things that are contained within the department. So I will start and I'm going to go through a number of areas very quickly, very high line. If there's any detail that you want to send on, please do. If you can just give me a quick indication, I just want to touch base when I have you on a few areas. I'm going to start where you finished off on your own staff, because I think that is a crucial issue in terms of vacancies, in terms of pay, and we do need to see, and I mean, we tend to always look at these things as cost, but these are members of our community, members of our economy, people who are spending in the economy. So frontline staff absolutely do need to be supported and have been under undue pressure, there's no question about it. In terms of the current pay issue, where is the department at with that? And in terms of the vacancies, what are the plans?
Okay, well, in terms of where we're at with pay, we're governed by what happens with the negotiations between the Department of Finance on behalf of the whole civil service and NIPSA. So we know that there's a pay offer has been communicated in terms of 5% plus £1,500 non-consolidated. So that'll be put to members. That'll be balloted. NIPSA will have their view on it, and we'll see how that plays out. We know where that sits in relation to inflation, and that's just going to take its own time in terms of that. But listen, compared to £500 after tax that people got the previous year, I think staff will welcome that. Whether it's enough in terms of the union negotiations, another question, and I don't really want to comment on that, but I'm just glad to see that offer being made, and I'm also very conscious in terms of that offer's being made in terms of what's affordable. So I'm very focused on that as well. So I think there's a level of realism that's going to be required around this as well.
Okay, thank you. Second issue for me then is around the strategies, the various strategies, the anti-poverty strategy, the other social inclusion strategies. When can we expect to see those coming to the executive table?
Okay, anti-poverty strategy, I've spoken to Minister, so Minister's absorbing a huge brief here, and we're trying to prioritise things for him so we can actually take all of that on board. Anti-poverty strategy, we've had an initial conversation with him. We'll be doing more detailed briefing for him. I think we're some months away before an anti-poverty strategy is in strong enough shape before it will come to an executive. I visited Scotland just before Christmas. Actually, these two guys were with me, and one of the reasons I wanted to go to Scotland was to see just exactly what they'd done around anti-poverty. And I know that the child payment, for example, was a big piece. So that what the Scots have been able to do is put money into the mix, and that statistically has lifted bigger numbers out of poverty in terms of where the statistical line is. But if that money was removed, it just dropped back down and again. So it's a bit of an artificial prop in my view. So question for me is what should we be doing by way of anti-poverty, which has got much more sustainability around it. So where's the wealth generation? Where's the wealth creation? Where's the employability? And even the whole childcare piece is a very, very important piece in this in terms of people being able to work, so they can earn more, and that can help address the poverty situation. So I think we want to reflect on some of that.
Okay.
I think it would be easy to produce, and I've seen an early draft. I've seen a draft of the anti-poverty strategy. It would be easy to produce something which is simplistic. I would rather have something which is more nuanced, and I think our minister needs to own what's there. So we need to work that through with him to see where he is.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting just to see what his perspective on that is. The other strategies you mentioned, the social inclusion ones.
Yeah.
We're just starting to work those through with him. I think we've been more focused, I suppose, up to date with benefits as such and housing with them. So we're just starting to get into some of the wider stuff with them in terms of some of the social inclusion stuff.
Just in relation to the poverty thing then, so the Care Poverty Commission's report, Les Allenby report, indicated that we could lift 3,400 unpaid carers out of poverty and a further 2,500 out of deep poverty. And carers, unpaid informal carers, have been a very, very hard put upon section of our community here, propping up the system. Have you had any, and the Minister had any opportunity to consider what might be done in relation to that Commission report?
I know he has met Les. We also met Les on a number of occasions, and he's the Discretionary Sport Commissioner, so sometimes he takes that hat off and we have the wider discussions with him. So what we're trying to do is understand the cost of all of this. And Minister's asked for a readout on what the affordability dimension is. So I'll come back to the 111 million, which could be touching 150 million this next year we're about to go into. So where would we, it's one thing having the proposition, that's where I'm talking about the ambition, it's one thing having the proposition to say this is what we would like to do with carers, or this is what we'd like to do with welfare reform mitigations in the future, but how can we pay for it? And I think the key thing for me is that the Minister will only countenance, I think, taking something forward to an executive and say, well, look, how are we going to do this in sustainable footing? That's where he will be on it. He's made that very clear to me. He says, I don't want to see wish lists. I want to see stuff that's meaningful, that's sustainable, that we can put in place, that will last the pace. So that's the challenge he's put back to us. That's a difficult challenge in the context we find ourselves in, but it's a difficult challenge for the executive because not only do I have to balance my budget, and that's a really critical responsibility I have as a county officer, but the executive has to balance its overall budget as well and make sure that everything's in keeping. And I'm just listening to stuff on the way in the car this morning about the health, and you'll know that very, very well. Some of the numbers were very, very scary. So if you were to prioritise health and education and infrastructure the way they're talking about doing, it also raises big questions for me about where we sit in the pecking order. And there's a huge impact in terms of health by not doing some of these things as well. And they rock up on health store, these problems, if we don't provide support to. So it's a conundrum. It's not an easy situation. Colm, I'm going to move on, Colm. I'm going to move on. I have two more very quick ones I want to touch, and then I want to get to members. Irish language strategy. Where are we on that, and where are we on producing a timeline for the Irish language strategy? The Irish, well, we've been looking at languages in the round. The Minister's kind of picked up very, very quickly on the sign language piece. First of all, he's made that a particular priority. So we haven't fully briefed him on the detail yet of the Irish language strategy. So basically what we're trying to do with him is put together our operating plan for the next year and put together our budget for the next year. That will clearly set out our priorities. So we're trying to work our way through that. It just hasn't been scheduled yet in terms of where we're going in terms of the detailed briefing. So it's in the mix. In the mix.
Okay, I'd be keen that continues to progress well. And the final one from me then: how confident are you that we can deliver Euro 2028 or 2024, the European?
Well, I'm really pleased, Chair, that I'm not responsible for delivering the Euros in Northern Ireland. So it's really good the Department for Economy have got that one. So that's one for Conor Murphy and his team. But I know what you're asking.
There are critical
I know what
elements.
you're asking. We're a critical element of it. We're in good shape in terms of what is an exceptionally challenging programme of work. Casement Park is really, really difficult. And I would have said to you, if you had asked me start of August, were we in a good position after we put the beat notice out to do the reconfiguration of the contract with Heron Brothers and the Buckingham Group? I would have thought we were pretty close to having everything in place. But things were a bit unkind to us commercially because the Buckingham Group went into administration shortly after that, and it left Herons very much on their own. And I think a very big ask of any local company to try and take that on themselves. So we've done a lot of work since then. So we've been realigning our procurement. We've been working very closely with our funding partners to look at how the funding should be taken forward. We had a technical visit from UEFA yesterday and the day before. So we're live on absolutely every line that we need to be live on. I'm continuing to resource the team that we have with the level of expertise that we need. So we're progressing. We're progressing well. I'm comfortable with how we're progressing. There are clear issues about the level of funding that's required. You never know the level of funding you need for these things in definitive terms until you test the market, until you procure. Yes, there are estimates in business case terms, and I've seen lots of figures bandied about. We haven't bandied any figures about. We won't be bandying any figures about. That's all very commercial, it's all very sensitive, and as soon as you start talking numbers, then what you're saying to people out there who are bidding for the work, well, you start at that level and work your way up. So we're very, very conscious of the commercial sensitivities of all of that. So I'm in a reasonably confident position in this, in terms of everything that we could do, we've done. But we have significant obstacles still to consider, and some of those obstacles are outside of our control, and that's a big factor, particularly around funding. So, and that's the issue for partners in the round. So, Euros, I would be hopeful, very hopeful, and I'm very pleased to see the progress that we've made, and many. The vast bulk of what we're doing from a point of view of where DFC is with its partners, we're on track, but we have a window. We have a window that we need to make sure we maximise.
And I take it you would agree with me that it would have a huge benefit to us in terms of delivering that competition. It's a massive plus for us in general.
Well, I'm looking at the economic benefits, societal benefits, sporting benefits. I was at at Windsor Park the other night, and we were talking about to the IFA, GAA, and a number of political figures who were there as well. People understand the wider benefits of all of this, but what they're needing to work out is, well, okay, in terms of the cost. That's how do we resolve that? So that the benefits are there.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm going to go to members now, and they may go into more detail in some of those issues. I know I've done a bit of a whistle stop, so that doesn't prevent members from picking them up again. So if Andy first, then Ciara, Kelly, and Morris.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll attempt to be succinct. Colin, if I can take that issue, the last issue first, and I appreciate you've said you're not going to go into figures, and I wouldn't expect you to do so at this stage, but in terms of the conversations you've had with the UK government, is there a confidence that the money that is outstanding or will be required to meet the shortfall? Because I think we can fairly say there will be a shortfall in terms of the funding that's been announced and committed so far. The UK government, will they provide that? And is there any indication at this stage that the executive will be required, given the difficult budget constraints that you've already outlined, the executive will be required to consider a further increase in their budget?
I'll be honest with you, I would find it very difficult to sit here and speak on behalf of the Secretary of State. That wouldn't be for me to do. And I think he's on record of saying, we'll find the money. We saw that piece in the media, but he's also been in the media lately to say, look, we need to make sure this thing's under control and it's not running away with itself. So he's put a word of caution out there as well. From our point of view, we know we're looking at something which is construction inflation. We know that's the scenario. We know that the configuration of the stadium had changed from what it was originally meant to be. We know that UEFA have particular requirements as well, which has increased the cost to some extent as well. So there are a number of players involved in the British government in terms of this. We're very, very close to them. I think the conversations are happening. I think there's a level of sensitivity about that, but I think they're now getting into a political sphere as distinct from what's been happening over the last number of months. Is us as officials, Andy, we're heavily involved in that. I think it's going to ratchet up. I think in terms of it being more of a political issue in terms of how the money gets resolved.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I'll leave that there. Probably a discussion for another time when we have a bit more time. Can we pivot across then to sub-regional? And this committee covered at length, obviously, sub-regional and the disappointment that we're so far on down the line and it hasn't been delivered. And there was an indication, certainly by the officials then that came before us as a committee, just as the executive had gone down, that everything was in place, was ready to go. It just needed to go to the executive. Is that still the case? And is it just a case of the minister familiarising himself where we currently are, or is there another engagement exercise now being commissioned?
There's an engagement exercise just completing.
Okay.
So we have a very positive proposition that we put to Minister, which he really likes. The Minister's very, very strongly focused on sub-regional, and it's taken far too long. The condition of a number of the stadia of the performance clubs needs a lot of work done on it. We're very, very conscious of that. What we've been doing over the last number of months has been an exercise actually to understand the level of objective need around what actual state are they in, and also then to help clubs bring forward, a number of the clubs to bring forward plans, their business plans as to how they could improve that. So there's a process ongoing. I IFA and the clubs and NIFL are all in the mix in that, because we also know that the National Training Centre is part of all of this as well. So I think there's been a really good dialogue. There's a lot of really good trust built up. The Minister really wants to progress this. We know that 34.6 million isn't going to cut it in terms of the overall ask, because I think that you have the same issues in terms of, it's been 10, 12 years. Some grounds have been improved in that time, some others haven't, but you still have a construction inflation issue and all of that as well. So I think there will be some good early work on that, but I think beyond that 34.6 million and beyond any first tranche of what might get done in terms of Minister bringing something through to the Executive, I think you will see the need for further tranches of money to actually complete this over a longer period of time. This is a programme of work which will take a number of years to do, even from the point of view of having the construction capacity to do it, and even for the clubs themselves to have the capacity to take this on. Some of it's very complex.
No, absolutely. And is there a timeline when we can expect the Minister then to take that to the Executive? Because, as I say, previously there was a hope and an anticipation that was going to be achieved before the Executive come down previously.
We haven't nailed down a specific date yet, but look, I would be disappointed if we weren't here in the next couple of months with this in a good bit of detail, if not before. So we're accelerating this as fast as we can. There's a bit of due process to finish up with the clubs in terms of their business cases coming forward. So that's really what the issue is, just the timing on that. But this is motor ahead. This is motor ahead at speed. So, and he's asked me to make sure we can bring this forward at pace. So if he was here now, he'd be saying, I'm pushing Colin and the team to get this as fast as I can.
Okay, two final points, Chair. I appreciate we're under time constraint. Can we jump the disability strategy, and obviously declare an interest in respect to my own disability in that regard? Obviously, we're yet to see the strategy come forward and get Executive approval, but is there any work being done in regard to that? And I know we picked up on this previously, Colin, about wider disability legislation. There is a keenness and an appetite within the wider disability sector that we would see work progressing on that.
Yeah, but look, there's a lot of drafting work has been done, Andy. I think what we want to do is sit down and do a deep dive in this with Minister so he sees what's there. And we have an opportunity with him to say, okay, what we think will fly and what won't fly, what we need to change and what won't need to change, and very conscious of the point you're making with the legislation as well. So I know he has set it out to us very, very early. I mean, the first Saturday night I met him here, he said one of the key things I want to do is address the issue of disability and take that forward in a positive way. So I know that will happen. Again, we're trying to work through some of the timings here in relation to our operating plan going forward. So it's still very early days for us. Just trying to set this out and then bring it back together again in terms of what it's going to look like, because the last thing we want to do is have 50 items on an operating plan or a business plan that we aren't going to be able to deliver. So we're going to prioritise this very, very, very carefully and be realistic about it as well.
Appreciate that. And then just the last point, and I know the Chair's already touched on it, welfare mitigations, but in the wider context, is there a wider scoping exercise review? I know some of those mitigations are potentially coming to its legislative end, isn't it, around benefit cap, etc. Obviously, bedroom tax, we extended that with no end date. Is there a wider review? And I certainly would be keen to see some work done around some of the recommendations in the welfare mitigations review, especially around CARES and in the context of the Chair's already highlighted, lifting people out of poverty.
So we will do a statutory report on this in March, by March 25. We're going to kick that off now in April, so that'll come through. I'll bring Paddy in because I know you've been very close to this.
Yeah, just to confirm what Colin said, we have a statutory obligation to do a review by March 25, so we're kicking that off as we speak. The independent review, we're also doing a review of the costings, so you'll appreciate that it was 2022 when the report came to us. So we've gone back to the people who've been working on the costings just to get the most up-to-date costings available for the recommendations that were in Les's report. Minister and I met with Les last week, and my team were working on a number of submissions at the minute, just setting out what the review would look like, but also then the updated versions of the costs associated with the independent review.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Ciara.
Just kind of the areas I want to kind of focus on. Obviously, the increasing number of people on the social housing waiting list and housing stress and the utilisation of non-standard accommodation. Housing and sustainability, it's huge. Huge demands placed upon it. won't be able to deliver without the revitalisation of the housing executive. So probably an update on where that's at would be really, where we are at it, because it's a top priority. We need to be getting the housing executive back building again. And as our previous minister had alluded to in the housing supply strategy, we need to be seeing ambitious plans of 100,000 plus houses being built. And I know obviously we may have 1 year budgets, but we need to be really, really ambitious if we're going to tackle housing stress in each of our neighbourhoods. That's kind of one area if you want to focus in on that. And maybe if you just tie in, I'm conscious you had mentioned, Colm, supporting people. Obviously there has been a review of supporting people. There's a framework sitting there. We've heard from the likes of organisations through Homeless Connect and through the all-party group the critical importance of those 850 services that are being offered, and they are absolutely critical. What is the plan there? Because you had mentioned the minister had briefed on key priorities. I didn't hear housing, so I would particularly
like... Housing was the first thing I said.
Oh,
housing was the very first thing I said, so...
I missed the detail of that, so I apologise.
So we protected supporting people last year. One of the first visits he did was to a supporting people organisation as well, so he's very focused on this. Just before I pass across to Mark, it's almost like listening to Grania Long as you speak there. So Grania saying the same stuff to us. We get that all the time. We know the level of ambition the housing executive have. We know the capability building they've been going through in terms of wanting to be able to tackle some of this. And we just need to make sure, again, that the resourcing's in place for that. And we need to make sure the focus is there for that. And we need to make sure the governance is right for it too. So I'll come back in a wee second. I'll just pass it across to Mark.
Okay. You've linked a whole load of things there together, because that's how it is. All of these things are kind of interrelated. And I think you started off with the social housing waiting list, and that's about mid 40,000s in terms of households on the waiting list, and about 3/4 of those are in housing stress. So, as you know, that means they're in a form of housing that doesn't meet their needs. Colin mentioned, I suppose, during his opening remarks there about the social housing development programme, and our ambition had been to scale that up. So in the year last year, we were able to exceed the targets. We had a target of 1,950. The outturn was 6 more than that. So every house is important. This year, because of the budget capital allocation we got, that equated to 1,470 starts. Now, I'm hopeful that we could exceed that, but it'll be by a handful. So I think for me, a good outturn would be about 1,500. As you know, when we get to the end of the year, if there's any kind of slip in a scheme, we can dip below the target level, but hopefully that's the sort of level that we're talking about. And look, in terms of the waiting list, I think that we all know that we're not building enough social houses. The best way to reduce the waiting list is to have more social houses to place people in. And I know that all tenures have a part to play in supplying the meeting the housing need here, but social housing is the bedrock, let's be honest. And I suppose that links then to revitalisation. So the pressing need for revitalisation is the state of the housing executives. It's about 82,000 houses now. I'm sort of conscious when we started talking about this, because I always have a figure in my head of 85 and then it was 84. We're selling houses every year, and truth be known, we're probably selling the houses that are in the best condition, so that what we're left with is a housing stock that we know needs a huge level of investment. And just to give you a sense of the level of investment that's required, the last analysis that we did and published, carried out by Savills for us, 10.3 billion of an investment requirement over the next 30 years. The only way currently that can be funded is through rent. There's no scenario in which you can use the current rent model to meet that investment challenge. That's obvious, I suppose, but the analysis shows that. That's probably only going to escalate, and every time that we any delay is going to further add to the level of the investment requirement. So in terms of where we are with revitalisation of the Housing Executive, it really relies on two things. So one is that the Housing Executive is going to be able to borrow in a way that doesn't score on the public balance sheet. So I know probably members understand that pretty well. There's an ongoing discussion with the Treasury about the budgeting treatment of the Housing Executive's borrowing. So I suppose the Housing Executive is able to borrow at the minute. It's just that the impact of that on public finances makes that prohibitive. So if we were able to get a different budgeting treatment, that would unlock the Housing Executive's ability to borrow, and then that would have to be serviced by a rent trajectory that enables the borrowing to be repaid. So that's as you know, that's the overall model of revitalisation. We have a briefing with the Minister in the next week or so just to take him through the detail of that. So it's early days in terms of the Minister's priority, but I know he gets that in the same way that you would yourself.
And we are aware that we will have yourself back in the next few weeks so we can go into a bit more detail.
Just supporting people then, just in relation to...
Just had one wee thing. Just the other piece about that you want to mention a wee bit about, we have to work through DOF to get to Treasury, so Treasury will not be pushed in this either, so, it'll take a bit of time. And they'll be wary of this as well in terms of levels of debt increasing and all sorts of things. So we just need to factor that into our thinking as well. So it's not all in our control here just to drive that through.
Yeah, Treasury will obviously be concerned that any borrowing is able to be repaid in a sustainable way, and they'll also be concerned about the level of public debt generally. That's something that the Treasury have to take a view on for the wider economy. Just very quickly, you mentioned the housing supply strategy. That was one of those documents that we felt was ready to go, and time beat us. The collapse of the Assembly and the Executive meant that we weren't able to take it to the Executive. We completed consultation on it. We have wide engagement across the public sector. I don't want to be overconfident about it, but I think it's still in good shape to take to the Executive, and I'm hopeful that can be done fairly quickly. And it is ambitious in terms of the level of particularly social housing that we'll need over the planned period. Supporting people, Ciara, you mentioned, we've been very conscious of the pressure that supporting people providers are under. You'll have heard us say, despite budget cuts everywhere else, we've protected the budget for supporting people, but we've, by and large, we've only really been able to protect it in cash terms, and it's subject to the same pay and price pressure as everybody else. So we're absolutely aware that supporting people providers are under a lot of pressure. We do look for every opportunity to try and support the viability of organisations, but we're not here to say that everything's rosy, because they're certainly under huge pressure, and I think the Minister recognises that and has been out already to visit a supporting people service.
Well, thank you, and I did have two others, but just one final one one section under community empowerment, and obviously getting a fair funding deal. Colm, you had mentioned about being able to protect the 250 organisations. I'm conscious now in the incoming years in relation to the neighbourhood renewal groups. What's your thoughts on that to try and ensure that there's a fair funding moving forward in the next financial year?
Yeah. Well, the people in place review is still ongoing. We're still working our way through that. So it's like all of these things. So every one of these sort of strategies and policies, whatever else, when you have a change of minister, you need to do an MOT in terms of what you've got and sort of do a bit of a spring clean on it and say, okay, there's where we are. So we're very conscious of the value of what's been done across all of that. There are a number of factors with it as well, which that people in place review have been throwing up as well. There are areas where other organisations could come into play and would like to come into play but haven't. Yeah. It's kind of it's closed off. So we're very, very conscious of that. So we're trying to work our way through the rest of the route. We haven't actually bottomed it out yet. But when we do, we'll take it through the Minister. We'll come here. But we're very conscious of the value of what's been done. I mean, we had our departmental board meeting yesterday in Dungannon Clark's yesterday. A prime example of community empowerment at work in terms of the wellbeing hub that they now have there for the local community. It's incredible. And I've been to so many of those right across Northern Ireland. And different communities, and you've seen the value of it. It doesn't matter where you go, you get the same impact of it. But we need to make sure we're not just holding those in pockets. Yeah. and other areas that maybe do need them. So for me, it's a wee bit saying, okay, just have we got the right measures here in terms of where poverty actually is now? And that's the question. I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable to ask that question, but that question will be asked of us, and we need to answer it. So, and we need to answer honestly and fairly. But the commitments and the principles that we have in terms of approaching this, I mean, I'm sticking true to the way we've done them. So, but I've got to bring that to our minister and see how he reacts to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I absolutely agree. Those, I think it's a question of building on the success of the new behaviour renewals. You know, maybe there's a way of looking at smaller areas and other areas. But anyway, on it, Kelly, and then Morris, and then Melissa.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much, folks, for coming along. It's great to be in a committee with you. And thank you during the time that we weren't available for the department, keeping most of us up to date on what was
Thanks
happening.
to you guys as well for coming. It made our lives a lot easier as well. Believe you me, it was good.
One of the things that I picked up from the report that you have sent through, and appreciate the ministers as another place at the moment, is we're not hearing, I'm thinking about housing, a housing outcome. You know, potential programme for government, we've New Decade, New Approach, we'd said we would have a housing outcome. And the reason why I'm so interested in that is because of the potential that we have of cross-departmental understanding of how important housing is. We know that the housing supply is a problem. But to be quite frank, Northern Ireland Water and planning is part of that problem because it delays housing. And I'm just wondering, with that housing outcome, is there any further discussions on that? And I'll just keep asking on the housing theme first. The other thing that has me very concerned, and I noted that it's in your plan about the climate change that Angus Kerr is looking after, the residential decarbonisation roadmap. We're going to have to plan ahead, and that may mean that social housing or housing associations change the plan of what their houses look like in order for us to make those targets to move homes away from fossil fuels. Maybe it'll come up as we think about the budgets going forward and how much research we can actually do into that. I'm very keen to consider if what we have at the moment is the right way to go. In the south, they use something very different in how they measure how that's affected. That seems to be a lot more pragmatic, with the BEAR rating instead of the EPC rating. So I'd be keen to find out, maybe you can write back to us about that. On the housing stuff, I just believe that there's an underpinning of that anti-poverty work that contains housing. It also then moves on, Paddy, into your work with benefits. If we don't have that underpinning of the anti-poverty strategy that goes underneath all the departments are doing, we're going to miss out on the opportunities that health and education and others can bring to it. Has there been any discussions with the other departments on that cross-departmental working? Paddy, I'm going to run through all of these and let you answer them all. The move to university credit, or universal credit, how's it going? It seems to be all calm. My office is not inundated, which is a good thing. But I also wonder, there's potentially by the end of this year going to be a new government, a new direction perhaps, and I was wondering, has there been any discussions, even in these early days, between the Minister and the Department and the Shadow Secretary of State of their intentions towards what potentially could be AMI and directions with that budget? Again, with the supporting people, just to reiterate what Ciara has said, I got a very grateful breakdown of what the supporting people budget has been over the last 10 years, and we can see the figures are very similar. So real terms, they haven't had any inflationary increases for quite a significant period of time, and as a result we've hit over 10,000 people who are homeless for the first time, and that's a terrible figure. So the correlation between prevention and knee-jerk reaction to having to deal with homelessness is something I would love to hear if there's anything being thought of on that. And my last one really is an ask to find out what's happening. In the past, me as a scrutiny person asking questions would be asking questions about housing executive, doing comparisons with social housing and providers. The question we're getting back is go to the housing executive rather than the operational stuff coming through the department. That does seem to be a change, and I'm just wondering, as a scrutiny committee, does that mean that we can't talk to you about the operational values of housing executive? But there you go, everything thrown at you there.
Okay, I'll hand across to Mark in a second. Just a couple of things I want to pick up. That last one, by the way, the operational piece, it ties in to some degree with what I was saying to Chair at the very beginning. Time was we would have had enough staff to go chasing up all of the detail for the operational answer. So the question went through the process, through the Assembly, it would arrive down with us. Then we would go to the housing executive and actually ask the housing executive or council, whoever it might be, to scour the operational data, which we don't hold, it's their data. And then we get it back, we compile it, we put a bow on it and send it back. A lot of that, some of that data is available publicly. We prefer that data to be pulled directly from the ALB because they can provide it, and it will be a much more efficient thing for you. You'll get it faster. It'll be a lot more efficient for us, and we're probably third in the league table in terms of getting written AQs.
Just saying, my concern in that is the information is not readily available from the ALB, and it takes a bit of time to get that.
Yeah.
So some, I agree with
Yeah.
you, can be got from them, but some of it is not as quick to get. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking to RHI, you know, and the need to be able to be over the scrutiny. So
Yeah,
it's,
well, look,
I'm just disappointed. But if that's a change and we have to go to the Housing Executive, then at least we know. But where there is issues, when we're not getting the information from an ALB, I think we will be coming back to you guys.
That's fine. If there's an issue where that doesn't happen, I have no problem with you escalating that back. Just on the housing piece, you were involved in the missions work that was done. So the link between that and anti-poverty strategy and all the benefit stuff, very much live, very much feeding into a draft programme for government. So Jane led a lot of really good work on that. And we're very proud of the work that was done with yourselves in terms of that. So none of that will be lost. Housing is a single programme for government pillar on its own. It would be something that I think we would value that. It's huge because if you've got a roof over your head, you've got most things. And we've had those conversations as well about benefits are all well and good, but if you haven't got your own place, it's very, very difficult. So we saw the value of linking up with other departments. I thought we did some really rich work. That work will not be lost, and it hasn't been lost. And the reason I know that as well is because when I was talking to our minister just a few days ago, I was talking to him about coming here, and he said, "Look, I don't want us to end up in a situation where," he said, "I'm looking to the south. I'm reading the news articles. I'm seeing the news where people just can't get homes. They can't get something they can rent at decent money. The levels of homelessness are really, really growing at a hell of a rate. The numbers of asylum seekers that are coming in, there's hardly a hotel to be had, and Dublin out with that." So we've seen lots of issues there. So I think there's a concern that we can see what's happening with them. So we need to deal with this in a way that gives us a sustainable answer. And I know it's a word I've used a few times in the briefing today about sustainability. We need to try and do something here that's going to actually put housing on an appropriate footing, whether you're renting or buying, or whether you're renting in the private sector or in the social housing. We need to fix this. And we actually need to make sure that in terms of homelessness prevention, we've got money and scope to do the prevention strategies, but we also have facilities for people who are homeless that are enough and are fit for purpose and that genuinely are temporary. And it's not just people being flipped from one hotel to the other. So we've seen that very, very close up. Minister's very concerned about it, so it's caught his attention, and it's caught his attention, I think, big time in terms of needing to fix that.
My worry is, has it caught the attention of the other ministers to understand that the homelessness issue puts pressure on health in particular, judicial system, others?
Well, possibly, I know we did with officials. Possibly it hasn't maybe resonated as heavily with other ministers yet, because we've seen, the sound bites from across all of the other ministers, and I'm not judging anybody. I mean, I think every ministry's got its big challenges. So our minister could shout very loud and hard about housing here as well. So that won't go quiet. I think we're hearing what you're saying, and he knows the value and the importance of this. You may want to add a bit to that, do you?
Sorry if we can just interrupt you there. So he's going to have to be really brief now. There's a load of questions pitched in there. You may need to come back outside of the session here on some of those answers, because I'm not going to have to move to other members in a minute or two.
Okay. I'll try and sort of rattle through things, and we will. If we can't give you the briefing today, or maybe in the session on the 20th, 21st, then always happy to write to you. In terms of the cross-departmental and cross-ministerial consensus about the need for all public services to gel when it comes to housing, I think there was good progress made under the last mandate. So we had the Justice Minister, the Health Minister, and our own Minister at the time were of a single mind about that problems don't stay fixed unless you fix them all together. So hopefully that's some reassurance that that's the way it'll head. As Colm says, standalone programme for government commitments, one for the ministers. Certainly was an NDNA. Our last minister consistently spoke on behalf of that. It didn't turn out to, there wasn't a programme for government in any case. You mentioned climate change and how other jurisdictions kind of judge the energy performance of their buildings, and I think we all recognise that the energy performance certificate is a very blunt instrument. So we'd certainly agree with you there. I mean, in terms of what we need to do in the various tenures of housing, that's a rule of thumb at best. So we would say EPC 3 and above is where we need to get to.
I'm going to have to stop you there, and I'm going to have to move on to Morris. Go ahead, Morris, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to be very, very brief, and thank you very much for your presentation here today. It's very interesting, but if I could maybe ask Mark a question about the housing infrastructure, especially in my constituency and neighbouring constituencies, and I'm sure people here who have got rural areas in their constituency, the infrastructure is not there to increase the housing stock. And that's a big, big problem right across Northern Ireland. So how do you hope to interact with the Department of Infrastructure to make sure there's water and sewage as a basic building block for social housing?
I talked about the housing supply strategy, and we describe that as a whole system approach. So if you were to look at the call for evidence and the consultation document, you're probably able to kind of infer from that what the housing strategy is likely to say. We do need to have local development plans prioritising housing properly and being aware of the level of investment that's needed to facilitate the building of houses. So the problem is, if you don't get that, then you trying to put all of the cost on housing developers, social or private, actually to develop the water and sewerage infrastructure. It just makes housing unviable. We hear that from private sector developers and from the housing associations. So the housing supply strategy is saying we need to recognise that if we're going to be ambitious and deliver this number of new houses in Northern Ireland, then that means investments required in infrastructure, changes made to planning policy so that we can speed up the progress of housing through the system. Look, at the minute, there are areas where it's extraordinarily difficult, as you probably know, to get connections to the wastewater system. The way that NI Water and the planning system work at the minute is, if a planning consent is given, there's a statutory obligation on NI Water to connect it to the water system. So that has been getting us over a bit of the problem in some areas, but it's a bit like the stock investment challenge. The longer we leave concerted action on it, the worse the problem gets.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other one, with your
Very briefly,
permission, Chair,
Morris.
but very, very brief, and it's in your when you mentioned there about selling some of the housing stock. Do you find that some of the housing stock that has been sold at a very reasonable price to tenants is now finding its way back into the buy-to-rent market?
No doubt about that.
So how can that be overcome, or how can that be investigated, that it's not a cheap way of buying houses to then have extortionate rents?
Yeah, look, the operation of the Housing Executives House Sales Scheme is in statute, so it'll be a decision for the Minister whether he wants to take forward amendments to that, or if he wants to abolish it. That's something for him to decide and take to the Executive. I think previous attempts to do that weren't successful, but there's no doubt about it's a loss of a public asset. It's very likely to lead them into probably quite an informal kind of private rented sector. And for me, I suppose the big issue is you sell houses at a massive discount, and the receipt, even if the department was able to retain that receipt to go towards new social house building, it doesn't get anywhere close to the cost of building a new social house. It's maybe you're selling something that it takes you 3 times as much money to replace.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. No, I have to move on, Morris. I have to move on. Sorry, time doesn't allow.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Melissa. Sorry, Morris.
agus tá sé an just be able to taithne na súil agam sa leisle na hainneocha. In other words, you're all very welcome, and it's nice to be able to put faces to the names now as well. That too often we end up dealing with people and we don't recognise them as such. My question again, too, similar to, well, I agree entirely with what Morris just has alluded to there in relation to rural communities in particular. My question, in one respect, is in relation to the whole council area. And it's I know the difficulties that you have in balancing budgets and all the rest of it, but the actual rate support grant, is that a wee bit like the low-lying fruit in a sense? And it's like that where the department has nearly like passed the buck from the department to the councils, who in turn either limit their services or again charge people who probably ill can afford it higher rates.
Yeah, it's an interesting question you ask. Can I just give you an assurance that nobody has passed the buck? So that was my decision. I'm very conscious of the rules around the rate support grant, so the level of rate support grant is discretionary. So the decision to reduce it by the 4.9 million last year was not taken lightly. So can I also just say to you as well, Militia, the single biggest hit of anybody in our budget was our department. So our department got stuffed in this, if I'm totally honest, in terms of the numbers of staff that we have to actually deliver. So we took a lot of pain so that others wouldn't have to take pain. And our ALBs have had to stand up to an awful lot as well. So I met the councils, I met every one of them, and I briefed them on more than one occasion, and I briefed them specifically on where we were going. And one of the things they said to me was about, for example, the labour market partnerships. They didn't want to see the funding withdrawn from that. And I was able to reinstate that, and I could really see the value of it. Obviously not every council needs rate support grant, and one of the councils has a judicial review against us on that anyway. So that's under due process. But given where we were and given the issues that we faced, if I had to do it again with the circumstances that I had and the amount of money that I had and the budget that I had, the approach I took was least harm, and everybody had to take a share of the pain of that, and that was where we ended up. So if I had to do it again, I would do it again. But we never passed the buck, and actually when you're reducing any funding, it's a difficult decision. It's always a difficult decision. So just want to make that clear to you. It was a lot of evaluation went into that before we did it.
Well, just as you say that your department took the greatest hit, I would think that my council area probably is the one area that took the greatest hit as well too. Yeah. And that's the result of having a low rate base in the very first instance. Mm-hmm. And again, that's then when all of the questions that Morris had alluded to there, i.e. in terms of infrastructure that allows the building of rural houses and everything else, can increase the rate base within that community. And just that I express hope that it may be, in fact, an area that's looked at again, that in particular for those councils that need it the most, that they don't end up then as a result of that paying the price. Yeah,
well, we're very conscious of the legal case around it, and we're very conscious of the impact of it. And I've met the chief executive from Derry and Strabane Council on a number of occasions. Every time he sees me, he says to me, and I met the chief executive of Middlester, and every time he sees me, he tells me as well. So, but that's where we ended up, and I acknowledge the impacts that you're describing to me as well.
Okay, thank you, members, and I appreciate you keeping that as brief. Permanent Secretary, appreciate your evidence or your attendance here this morning. I do look forward to seeing Mark and Paddy again. I know we have a number of your senior staff coming through, and we will welcome working through that process.
They're a fabulous team, Colm, so don't go easy on them. They're a great team.
They're well fit for
They're well fit for it.
I know, right. Well, listen, we look forward to working with you in the time ahead. We're very conscious. We have not only a short committee meeting, but a short mandate here, and we really do need to hit the ground running and get things moving.
From our point of view, it's good to see you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all, gentlemen, and good luck. Okay, members, thank you. And just to say, I actually have received an apology from Daniel McCrossan for today's meeting as well. Daniel hasn't been able to make it, so just to put that in. Members, moving on to agenda item 7, which is statutory rules. Today we will consider the last batch of SRs from the backlog that we were dealing with. Members will be glad to hear that, and glad to hear there are only 2 remaining in that backlog today. As per our meeting last week, we have several officials in attendance today from the department. Should any members have any questions in relation to any of the rules, the officials will give a brief outline on on each rule, and then I'll put the question to members on whether you're content to agree. So just to advise members that they have been provided at page 262 with a list of statutory rules that were laid since the end of the last mandate, but which no longer require a decision for one of the following reasons. It could be that they have been revoked and reenacted or superseded by subsequent statutory rules. The confirmatory period may have expired, or the department has indicated that it intends to revoke and remake the statutory rule, and the committee then will receive SL1 letters for these in due course. And I think that is certainly preferable to SRs in very close to the time. So we will now move on then to our first SR, and that's SR 2024/6, the Child Support Fees Revocation Regulations NI 2024, and those are page 265. So I invite to the table David Tarr and John Noble, who will be dealing with this SR. David and John, you're both very welcome to our meeting this morning. Thank you for your attendance. And would you please go ahead and give us a summary of the rule?
Okay, good morning. These regulations made on the 16th of January 2024, becoming operative as of the 18th of January 2024, revoked and reenact the provisions of the Child Support Fees Revocation Regulations Northern Ireland 2023, which ceased to have effect on the 18th of January 2024 by virtue of Section 36(4) of the Child Maintenance Act Northern Ireland 2008, having failed to be confirmed by a resolution of the Assembly within 6 months of becoming operative. These regulations amend the Child Support Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2014 so as to revoke Regulation 3, 6 and 7, whilst also revoking the now redundant 2023 regulations from the statute book. The Child Support Collection Domestic Abuse Act 2023 makes broader provisions for collect and pay arrangements in child support. Regulation 3, 6 and 7 of the 2014 regulations have effectively now been enshrined in primary legislation, the 1991 order, and as such are now surplus to requirements in secondary legislation, i.e. the 2014 regulations, and so are thereby revoked by Regulation 2 of these regulations. Regulation 3 revokes the Child Support Fees Revocation Regulations Northern Ireland 2023. Just the benefit of the regulations in association with the domestic abuse protections provided in the Child Support Collection Domestic Abuse Act 2023, revoking Regulations 3, 6 and 7 of the 2014 regulations helps pave the way to effectively allow for the collect and pay process to be used in a child maintenance case if either parent objects to using direct pay because of a previous criminal conviction related to domestic abuse by the other parent, or a current civil court order related to domestic abuse, such as a non-molestation order being in place. It is hoped that these changes will provide a better service and protect victims of domestic abuse. In revoking redundant provisions of the 2014 regulations, we are removing the risk of unnecessary duplication and any confusion that may arise in the legal community and amongst the wider public. This legislative package is subject to the confirmatory resolution procedure, which we will be taking forward with the Assembly in due course.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, well then, members, if there are no questions, then I will go to put the question formally to the committee, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/6, the Child Support Fees Revocation Regulations 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members, and thank you, John, for your assistance with that rule. And I invite you to leave the table and invite Hayley Ward to join David then at the table. Members, this is agenda item 8, SR 2024/15, the Occupational Pension Schemes Collective Money Purchase Schemes Regulations 2024 on page 272. So David and Hayley, I would be grateful if you go ahead and give us a summary of the intent and the requirement for this rule.
Yeah, so these regulations, along with the Occupational Pension Schemes, Collective Money Purchase Schemes, Modifications and Consequential and Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, will enable single or connected employer collective money purchase schemes to apply to the pension regulator for authorisation. Collective money purchase schemes provide an alternative in which the contributions of members and employers are pooled and invested with a view to delivering benefits at the level to which the scheme aspires. The regulations set out the detailed requirements for the process for applying to the pensions regulator for authorisation, as well as details regarding the authorisation criteria that need to be met in order for the collective money purchase schemes to operate. The regulations were made on the 24th of January and are operational from the 26th of January 2024, and they're subject to the confirmatory resolution before the Assembly.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions in relation to that rule? So, then members, any objections?
Can I advise we need to change the wording, just because this is subject to a confirmatory procedure, so
Okay.
just that it recommends that, okay?
Okay, so I put the question then, members, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/15, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Collective Money Purchase Schemes, Regulations, NI 2024, and recommends that it is approved by the Assembly. Do members agree?
Agree.
Thank you very much. Members, moving on then. So David here and all the officials that we've appeared over the past 3 weeks, which have been quite frantic in many senses, I want to place my thanks on the record for your assistance in working our way through those SRs. It has been a long process, but we've got to the end, and with your briefing on the rules, we've been able to ensure that there has been scrutiny of those. So thank you and your team again. I understand, David, that you're going to wait in the gallery should members have any queries in relation to the range of SL1s that are coming up. So, and I realise that some of these may have a short window of opportunity, members. So, any questions, please do give us those. And thank you, Hayley, and thank you, David, and thank you to all of your team, David. Thank you for that. So, members, I'm moving then to the first one, which is agenda item 9, SL1, at page 374 of your pack. This is the mesothelioma, lump sum payments, conditions and amounts, amendment regulations NI 2024, and technical remake in relation to 2023 amounts. So it is proposed that the 2024 regulations will come into operation on the 1st of April 2024. Members, any comments on the proposed rule? No? I know I can see Kelly was impressed with my pronunciation. I hope I get it right.
I was going to say, well done.
I hope I get it right on the second time of asking as well. So, members, then, is the committee content for the department to proceed to make the rule?
Yes.
Yes.
Content. Thank
Sorry,
you.
could I just ask one question? It's just for information for myself. Does the scheme, the operating of the scheme, always be in relation to the industrial injuries benefit? Is that always how it's increased?
You mean is the payments in miscellaneous? Yeah.
Yes, that one.
Linked to the operating of the benefits.
The industrial injuries benefit, that's always the case? No, that's fine.
Okay. So, can I confirm members content that the department make the rule?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Members, moving on then to agenda item 10 at page 380 of your pack. And this is SL1, the pneumoconiosis, etc., workers' compensation, payment of claims, amendment regulations, NI 2024. It is proposed that the rule will come into operation on the 1st of April 2024 or the day after that if it is affirmed by resolution of the Assembly, if later. These regulations amend the 1988 regulations to increase the amounts payable under the 1979 scheme by 6.7%, in line with the uprating of industrial injuries benefits. Members, any comments in relation to the rule or questions? No? Is the committee content for the department to proceed to make this rule?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, members. I then put the question that agenda item 11, SL1, the pneumoconiosis, etc., workers' compensation, payment of claims, regulations, page 368. These regulations make amendments to 1988 regulations to link the definition of disease. It is proposed that the rule will come into operation on the same date as the previous pneumoconiosis, etc., workers' compensation, specified diseases and prescribed operations amendment, on which it is consequential. So it follows from that. Do members have any comments in relation to this proposed rule? It's page 386, by the way.
No.
No comments then. Thank you. Is the committee therefore content for the department to proceed to make that rule?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on, members, to agenda item 12, SL1, the Social Security Benefits Operating Order, NI 2024, and technical remake in relation to 2023-24 rates. That's on page 393 of your pack. It is proposed that the 2024 order will come into operation on various dates from April the 1st, 2024. The 2024 order makes the North the only provision which corresponds to provision contained in an order made by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions in Britain. The Department has no power to set different rates of benefits and pensions for the North in the annual operating order. So do members have any comments in relation to the rule?
No.
Or questions? And if they, therefore then, is the committee content for the Department to proceed to make the rule?
Yes.
Content, thank you. Agenda item 13, SL1, the Social Security Benefits Regulations, NI 2024, and technical remake in relation to 2023 provisions, and this one's at page 403. It is proposed the 2024 regulations will come into operation on the 8th of April 2024. These regulations again contain technical provisions in consequence of the operating order which are replicated each year to ensure the correct implementation of the increased rates. Do members have any comments or questions?
No.
No? Are members content therefore the Department proceed to make the rule?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Members, again, agenda item 14, the pneumoconiosis, etc., workers' compensation, specified diseases and prescribed occupations amendment order, NI 2024, on page 410. I'll just check there, that's not a repetition of the earlier one. No, this is a separate pneumoconiosis.
Yeah.
So the proposed rule makes changes to realign the definitions of certain specified diseases in relation to the 1979 order with the definitions of the corresponding prescribed diseases set out in industrial injuries disabled benefit legislation. It is proposed that the rule, subject to approval by the Assembly, will come into operation on the same date as in Britain and or as soon as possible afterwards. Do members have any comments or questions on the rule?
No.
No, thank you. And therefore, is the committee content for the Department to proceed to make the rule?
Yes.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 15, SL1, the Occupational and Personal Pension Schemes General Levy Amendment Regulations 2024 on page 416. The general levy rates have not been increased in line with movements in inflation, but are reviewed annually to ensure that an appropriate amount is being raised by the levy to meet the costs that are being incurred. The most recent review found that the levy is in deficit. A change to the general levy rates is needed to continue to recover the accruing deficit and meet forecasted relevant expenditures of the above bodies. It is proposed that the rule will come into operation on the 1st of April 2024. Do members have any comments or questions on this rule?
No.
Can I just ask who's that levy applied on, or where does that levy come from? Yeah. Yeah, so the general levy rates, who are those applied to, or how are they applied?
They're applied to the pension providers, and it's just to build a stock of money so that if a pension provider failed or went into administration, then their pension pots would be protected. That's what the levy's purpose is.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. So, members, any other questions or comments? And is the committee therefore content for the Department to proceed to make this rule?
Yes.
Yep, thank you, members. Agenda item 16, SL1, the Occupational Pension Schemes Collective Money Purchase Schemes Amendment Regulations 2024 on page 423. These regulations make technical amendments to ensure the collective money purchase schemes can operate as originally intended, that they are run well and that the interests of members are protected. The proposed rule is expected to come into operation shortly. Do members have any comments or questions? No. Is the committee therefore content for the Department to proceed to make the rule?
Yep.
Thank you. Agenda item 17, SL1, the Occupational Pension Schemes Funding and Investment Strategy and Amendment Regulations 2024, page 432. The proposed rule will introduce measures to the Occupational Pensions Defined Benefit Scheme funding regime that will support trustees and sponsoring employers to plan and manage their scheme funding over the long term. The proposed rule also enables the pension regulator to intervene more effectively to protect members' benefits when needed. It's proposed that the rule will come into operation on the 6th of April 2024. Any questions or comments? No. Thank you, members. Therefore, is the committee content for the department to proceed to make the rule?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, members.
I interject.
Yep.
Do you mind if you ask the question again with regard to this? Just to get the wording absolutely correct.
Okay, so which one? 2024-6?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, members, we just want to revisit 2024 number 6, the child support fees revocation. So, to ask formally that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/6, the child support fees revocation regulations NI 2024, and recommends that it is approved by the Assembly. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Okay, members, thank you, and we are there. I think moving on to our forward work programme, and thank David and Haley and his team there. John, thank you very much. Thank you. So we're moving on, members, to the forward work programme, which is item 18. At next week's meeting, members, we are going to receive briefings from the Deputy Secretary of the Corporate Services Group and the Deputy Secretary of the Engaged Communities Group from the Department. We will then receive briefings from the other Deputy Secretaries over the following weeks, so briefings in weeks 4, 5 and 6 from the Deputy Secretaries in the Department, as well as a number of stakeholder groups, as relevant to themes or subjects under discussion in those weeks. So, members, have you any comments, or are you content to note that forward work programme?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, members.
Do we have any, sorry, just in regard to engaged communities you mentioned, will there be any other stakeholders?
On each of those dates, we're going to invite back the relevant stakeholders who've already asked to brief the committee. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, members, therefore content to note the forward work programme.
Can I just check on, sorry, can you repeat again who's the first one? So I got Emer, the Deputy Secretary for Engaged Communities. What was the first?
The first one was Corporate Services Group.
Services, thank you.
Okay, Sean. Okay, members, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 19, any other business. Members, do members have any other business today? No, thank you very much. So item 20 is date, time and location of the next meeting. So the next meeting of the Committee for Communities will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 7th of March 2024, here in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. Thank you. So the meeting is now adjourned, members, and I ask that you bear with me until I confirm we're in closed session.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29,